This is the 13th talk in this collection, and it's entitled Our Real Home. And this was first published in the book Living Dhamma. That was again translated by Puriso, Bruce Evans. And this was given on the occasion of addressing an aging lay disciple approaching her death. So this the scene is of Luang Por Chah in the person's home. So he's gone to visit this aged lay person as she's dying in her own home. Our real home. Now determine in your mind to listen respectfully to the Dhamma. While I am speaking, be as attentive to my words as if it was the Lord Buddha himself sitting before you. Close your eyes and make yourself comfortable, composing your mind and making it one-pointed. Humbly allow the triple gem of wisdom, truth and purity to abide in your heart as a way of showing respect to the fully enlightened one. Today I have brought nothing of material substance to offer you, only the Dhamma, the teachings of the Lord Buddha. You should understand that even the Buddha himself, with his great store of accumulated virtue, could not avoid physical death. When he reached old age, he ceded his body and let go of the heavy burden. Now, you too must learn to be satisfied with the many years you've already depended on the body. You should feel that it's enough. Like household utensils that you've had for a long time, cups, saucers, plates and so on. When you first had them, they were clean and shining. But now, after using them for so long, they've started to wear out. Some are already broken, some have disappeared, and those that are left are wearing out. They have no stable form. And it's their nature to be that way. Your body is the same. It's been continually changing from the day you were born, through childhood and youth, until now. The Buddha said that conditions, whether internal, bodily conditions, or external conditions, are not self. Their nature is to change. Contemplate this truth clearly. This very lump of flesh lying here in decline is reality, Satya Dhamma. The facts of this body are reality. They are the timeless teaching of the Lord Buddha. The Buddha taught us to contemplate this and to come to terms with its nature. We must be able to be at peace with the body, no matter what state it's in. The Buddha taught that we should ensure that it's only the body that is locked up in jail and the mind is not imprisoned along with it. Now, as your body begins to run down and wear out with age, don't resist, but also don't let your mind deteriorate along with it. Keep the mind separate. Give energy to the mind by realizing the truth of the way things are. The Lord Buddha taught that this is the nature of the body. It can't be any other way. Having been born, it gets old and sick, and then it dies. This is a great truth that you are presently witnessing. Look at the body with wisdom and realize this. If your house is flooded or burnt to the ground, whatever the threat to it, let it concern only the house. If there's a flood, don't let it flood your mind. If there's a fire, don't let it burn your heart. Let it be merely the house, that which is outside of you that is flooded or burned. Now is the time to allow the mind to let go of attachments. You've been alive a long time now. Your eyes have seen any number of forms and colours. Your ears have heard so many sounds. You've had any number of experiences. And that's all they were, experiences. You've eaten delicious foods, and all those good tastes were just good tastes, nothing more. The bad tastes were just bad tastes, that's all. If the eye sees a beautiful form, that's all it is, a beautiful form. An ugly form is just an ugly form. The ear hears an entrancing, melodious sound, and it's nothing more than that. A grating, discordant sound is simply that. The Buddha said that rich or poor, young or old, human or animal, no being in this world can maintain itself in any single state for long. Everything experiences change and deprivation. This is a fact of life about which we can do nothing to remedy. But the Buddha said that what we can do is to contemplate the body and mind, to see their impersonality, that neither of them is me or mine. They have only a provisional reality. It's like this house. It's only nominally yours. You couldn't take it with you anywhere. The same applies to your wealth, your possessions and your family. They are only yours in name. They don't really belong to you. They belong to nature. Now this truth doesn't apply to you alone. Everyone's in the same boat, even the Lord Buddha and his enlightened disciples. They differed from us only in one respect, and that was their acceptance of the way that things are. They saw it could be no other way. So the Buddha taught us to probe and examine the body, from the soles of the feet up to the crown of the head, and then back down to the feet again. Just take a look at the body. What sort of things do you see? Is there anything intrinsically clean there? Can you find any abiding essence? This whole body is steadily degenerating. The Buddha taught us to see that it doesn't belong to us. It's natural for the body to be this way because all conditioned phenomena are subject to change. How else would you have it? In fact, there is nothing wrong with the way the body is. It's not the body that causes suffering. It's wrong thinking. When you see things in the wrong way, there's bound to be confusion. It's like the water of a river. It naturally flows downhill. It never flows uphill. That's its nature. If a person was to go and stand on the riverbank and want the water to flow back uphill, he would be foolish. Wherever he went, his foolish thinking would allow him no peace of mind. He would suffer because of his wrong view, his thinking against the stream. If he had right view, he would see that the water must inevitably flow downhill, and until he realized and accepted that fact, he would be bewildered and frustrated. The river that must flow down the gradient is like your body. Having been young, your body has become old and is meandering towards its death. Don't go wishing it were otherwise. It's not something that you have the power to remedy. The Buddha told us to see the things the way things are and to then let go of our clinging to them. Take this feeling of letting go as your refuge. Keep meditating even if you feel tired and exhausted. Let your mind be with the breath. Take a few deep breaths and then establish the attention on the breath using the mantra word Buddho. Make this practice continual. The more exhausted you feel, the more subtle and focused your concentration must be, so that you can cope with any painful sensations that arise. When you start to feel fatigued, then bring all your thinking to a halt. Let the mind gather itself together and then turn to knowing the breath. Just keep up the inner recitation, Buddho, Buddho. Let go of all externals. Don't go grasping at thoughts of your children and relatives. Don't grasp at anything whatsoever. Let go. Let the mind unite in a single point, and let that composed mind dwell with the breath. Let the breath be its sole object of knowledge. Concentrate until the mind becomes increasingly subtle, until feelings are insignificant and there is great inner clarity and wakefulness. Then any painful sensations that arise will gradually cease of their own accord. Finally, you'll look on the breath as if it were some relatives come to visit you. When the relatives leave, you follow them out to see them off. You watch until they've walked up the drive and out of sight, and then you go back indoors. We watch the breath in the same way. If the breath is coarse, we know that it's coarse. If it's subtle, we know that it's subtle. As it becomes increasingly fine, we keep following it, at the same time awakening the mind. Eventually the breath disappears altogether, and all that remains is that feeling of alertness. This is called meeting the Buddha. We have that clear, wakeful awareness called Buddho, the one who knows, the awakened one, the radiant one. This is meeting and dwelling with the Buddha, with knowledge and clarity. It was only the historical Buddha who passed away. The true Buddha, the Buddha that is clear, radiant knowing, can still be experienced and attained today. And if we do attain it, the heart is one. So, let go. Put everything down. Everything except the knowing. Don't be fooled if visions or sounds arise in your mind during meditation. Lay them all down. Don't take hold of anything at all. Just stay with this unified awareness. Don't worry about the past or the future. Just be still, and you will reach the place where there's no advancing, no retreating, and no stopping. There's nothing to grasp at or cling to. Why? Because there's no self, no me or mine. It's all gone. The Buddha taught to empty yourself of everything in this way, not to carry anything around. He taught us to know, and, having known, let go. Realizing the Dhamma, the path to freedom from the round of birth and death, is a task that we all have to do alone. So keep trying to let go and understand the teachings. Put effort into your contemplation. Don't worry about your family. At the moment, they are as they are. In the future, they will be like you. There's no one in the world who can escape this fate. The Buddha taught to lay down those things that lack a real abiding essence. If you lay everything down, you'll see the truth. If you don't, you won't. That's the way it is, and it's the same for everyone in the world. So, don't grasp at anything. Even if you find yourself thinking, well, that's all right too, as long as you think wisely. Don't think foolishly. If you think of your children, think of them with wisdom, not with foolishness. Whatever the mind turns to, think of it with wisdom. Be aware of its nature. To know something with wisdom is to let it go and to have no suffering over it. The mind is bright, joyful and at peace. It turns away from distractions and is undivided. Right now, what you can look to for help and support is your breath. Now, this is your own work, no one else's. Leave others to do their own work. You have your own duty and responsibility. You don't have to take on those of your family. Don't take on anything else. Let it all go. This letting go will make your mind calm. Your sole responsibility right now is to focus your mind and bring it to peace. Leave everything else to the others. Forms, sounds, odours, tastes. Leave them to the others to attend to. Put everything behind you and do your own work. Fulfill your own responsibility. Whatever arises in your mind, be it fear of pain, fear of death, anxiety about others, or whatever, say to it, "Don't disturb me. You are no longer any concern of mine." Just keep this to yourself when you see those Dhammas arise. Now, what does this word Dhamma refer to? Everything is a Dhamma. There is nothing that is not a Dhamma. What about the world? The world is the very mental state that is agitating you at this present moment. What are they going to do? When I'm gone, who will look after them? How will they manage? This is all just the world. Even the mere arising of a thought fearing death or pain is the world. Throw the world away. The world is the way it is. If you allow it to dominate your mind, it becomes obscured and can't see itself. So whatever appears in the mind, just say, "This isn't my business. It's impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self." Thinking you'd like to go on living for a long time will make you suffer. But thinking that you'd like to die right away or very quickly isn't right either. It's suffering, isn't it? Conditions don't belong to us. They follow their own natural laws. You can't do anything about the way the body is. You can beautify it a little, make it attractive and clean it for a while, like the young girl who paints her lips and let their nails grow long. But when old age arrives, everybody's in the same boat. That's the way the body is. You can't make it any other way. What you can improve and beautify is the mind. Anyone can build a house of wood and bricks, but the Buddha taught that that sort of home is not our real home. It's only nominally ours. It's home in the world, and it follows the ways of the world. Our real home is inner peace. An external material home may well be pretty, but it's not very peaceful. There's this worry and then that, this anxiety and then that. So we say it's not our real home. It's external to us. Sooner or later we'll have to give it up. It's not a place we can live in permanently because it doesn't truly belong to us. It belongs to the world. Our body is the same. We take it to be a self, to be me and mine, but in fact it's not really so at all. It's just another worldly home. Your body has followed its natural course from birth, and now that it's old and sick, you can't forbid it from being that. That's the way it is. Wanting it to be any different will be as foolish as wanting a duck to be like a chicken. When you see that that's impossible, that a duck must be a duck and a chicken must be a chicken, and that the bodies have to get old and die. When you see this, you will find courage and energy. However much you want the body to go on lasting, it won't do that. The Buddha said, "Anicca vata sankhara." Impermanent, alas, are all conditions. Upadavaya dhammino, subject to rise and fall. Upajittava nirujanti, having arisen, they cease. Tesang upasamo sukho, their stilling is bliss. The word sankhara refers to this body and mind. Sankhara are impermanent and unstable. Having come into being, they disappear. Having arisen, they pass away, and yet everyone wants them to be permanent. This is foolishness. Look at the breath. Once it's gone in, it goes out. That's its nature. That's how it has to be. The inhalations and exhalations have to alternate. There must be a change. Conditions exist through change. You can't prevent it. Just think, could you exhale without inhaling? Would it feel good? Or could you just inhale? We want things to be permanent, but they can't be. It's impossible. Once the breath has come in, it must go out. When it's gone out, it comes back in again. And that's natural, isn't it? Having been born, we get old and then die. And that's totally natural and normal. It's because conditions have done their job, because the in-breaths and the out-breaths have alternated in this way, that the human race is still here today. As soon as we are born, we are dead. Our birth and our death are just one thing. It's like a tree. When there's a root, there must be branches. When there are branches, there must be a root. You can't have the one without the other. It's a little funny to see how at death people are so grief-stricken and distracted, and at birth how happy and delighted. It's delusion. Nobody has ever looked at this clearly. I think if you really want to cry, it would be better to do so when someone's born. Birth is death. Death is birth. The branch is the root is the branch. If you must cry, cry at the root, cry at the birth. Look closely. If there was no birth, there would be no death. Can you understand this? And don't worry about things too much. Just think, this is the way things are. This is your work, your duty. Right now, nobody can help you. There's nothing that your family and possessions can do for you. All that can help you now is clear awareness. So, don't waver. Let go. Throw it all away. Even if you don't let go, everything is starting to leave you anyway. Can you see how all the different parts of your body are trying to slip away? Take your hair. When you were young, it was thick and black. Now it's falling out. It's leaving. Your eyes used to be good and strong, but now they're weak. Your sight is unclear. When your organs have had enough, they leave. This isn't their home. When you were a child, your teeth were healthy and firm. Now they're wobbly, or you've got false ones. Your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, everything is trying to leave because this isn't their home. You can't make a permanent home in conditions. You can only stay for a short time, and then you have to go. It's like a tenant watching over his tiny little house with failing eyes. His teeth aren't so good, his eyes aren't so good, his body's not so healthy. Everything is leaving. So you needn't worry about anything, because this isn't your real home. It's only a temporary shelter. Having come into this world, you should contemplate its nature. Everything there is preparing to disappear. Look at your body. Is there anything there that's still in its original form? Is your skin as it used to be? Your hair? They aren't the same, are they? Where has everything gone? This is nature, the way things are. When their time is up, conditions go their way. In this world, there is nothing to rely on. It's an endless round of disturbance and trouble, pleasure and pain. There's no peace. When we have no real home, we're like aimless travellers out on the road, going here and there, stopping for a while and then setting off again. Until we return to our real homes, we feel uneasy. Just like a villager who's left his village. Only when he gets home can he really relax and be at peace. Nowhere in the world is there any real peace to be found. Poor have no peace, and neither do the rich. Adults have no peace, neither do the highly educated. There's no peace anywhere. That's the nature of the world. Those who have few possessions suffer, and so do those who have many. Children, adults, old and young, everyone suffers. The suffering of being old, the suffering of being young, the suffering of being wealthy, and the suffering of being poor, it's all nothing but suffering. When you've contemplated things in this way, you'll see aniccaṃ, impermanence, and dukkhāṃ, unsatisfactoriness. Why are things impermanent and unsatisfactory? Because they are anatta, not self. Both your body that is lying sick and in pain and the mind that is aware of it, its sickness and pain, are called Dhamma. That which is formless, the thoughts, feelings and perceptions, is called Nama Dhamma. That which is racked with aches and pains is called Rupa Dhamma. The material is Dhamma and the immaterial is Dhamma. So, we live with Dhamma, in Dhamma, and we are Dhamma. In truth, there is no self to be found. There are only Dhammas continually arising and passing away, as is their nature. Every single moment we're undergoing birth and death. This is the way things are. When we think of the Lord Buddha, how truly he spoke, we feel how worthy he is of reverence and respect. Whenever we see the truth of something, we see his teachings, even if we've never actually practiced the Dhamma. But even if we have a knowledge of the teachings, have studied and practiced them, as long as we still haven't seen the truth, we are still homeless. So, understand this point. All people, all creatures are preparing to leave. When beings have lived an appropriate time, they must go on their way. Rich, poor, young and old must all experience this change. When you realize that's the way the world is, you'll feel that it's a wearisome place. When you see that there's nothing real or substantial that you can rely on, you'll feel wearied and disenchanted. Being disenchanted doesn't mean that you're averse. The mind is clear. It sees that there's nothing to be done to remedy this state of affairs. It's just the way the world is. Knowing in this way, you can let go of attachment. You can let go with a mind that is neither happy nor sad, but at peace with conditions through seeing their changing nature with wisdom. Anicca vata sankhara. All conditions are impermanent. To put it simply, impermanence is the Buddha. If we truly see an impermanent condition, we'll see that it's permanent. It's permanent in the sense that its subjection to change is unchanging. This is the permanence that living beings possess. There is continual transformation from childhood through to old age, and that very impermanence, that propensity to change, is permanent and fixed. If you look at it like this, your heart will be at ease. It's not just you who has to go through this. Everyone has to. When you consider things in this way, you'll see them as wearisome, and disenchantment will arise. Your delight in the world of sense pleasures will disappear. You'll see that if you have many possessions, you have to leave a lot behind. If you have a few, you leave few behind. Wealth is just wealth. Long life is just long life. They're nothing special. What is important is that we should do as the Lord Buddha taught and build our own home. Building it by the method that I've been explaining to you. Build your own home. Let go. Let go until the mind reaches the peace that is free from advancing, free from retreating, and free from stopping still. Pleasure is not your home. Pain is not your home. Pleasure and pain both decline and pass away. The great teacher saw that all conditions are impermanent, and so he taught us to let go of our attachment to them. When we reach the end of our life, we'll have no choice anyway. We won't be able to take anything with us. So wouldn't it be better to put things down before then? They're just a heavy burden to carry around. Why not throw off that load now? Why bother to drag these things around? Let go. Relax. Let your family look after you. Those who nurse the sick grow in goodness and virtue. The patient who is giving others that opportunity shouldn't make things difficult for them. If there's pain or some problem or other, let them know and keep the mind in a wholesome state. One who is nursing parents should fill his or her mind with warmth and kindness and not get caught up in aversion. This is the one time you can repay your debt to them. From your birth through your childhood as you've grown up, you've been dependent on your parents. That you are here today is because of your mother and your father, and they have helped you in so many ways. You owe them an incredible debt of gratitude. So today, all of you children and relatives gathered together here, observe how your mother has become your child. Before, you were her children. Now, she has become yours. She has become older and older until she's become a child again. Her memory goes. Her eyes don't see well. Her ears aren't so good. Sometimes she garbles her words. Don't let it upset you. You who are nursing the sick must know how to let go also. Don't hold on to things. Just let her have her own way. When a young child is disobedient, sometimes the parents let it have its own way just to keep the peace, just to make it happy. Now, your mother is just like that child. Her memories and perceptions are confused. Sometimes she muddles up your names or asks you to bring a cup when she wants a plate. It's normal. Don't be upset by it. Let the patient bear in mind the kindness of those who nurse and patiently endure the painful feelings. Exert yourself mentally. Don't let the mind become scattered and confused, and don't make things difficult for those looking after you. Let those who are nursing fill their minds with virtue and kindness. Don't be averse to the unattractive side of the job, cleaning up the mucus and phlegm, urine and excrement. Try your best. Everyone in the family should give a hand. As she is the only mother you have, she gave you life. She's been your teacher, your doctor, and your nurse. She's been everything to you. That she's brought you up, shared her wealth with you, and made you her heir is the great goodness of parents. That's why the Buddha taught the virtues of katanyu and katavedi, knowing our debt of gratitude and trying to repay it. These two dhammas are complementary. If our parents are in need, unwell, or in difficulty, then we do our best to help them. This is katanyu katavedi, the virtue that sustains the world. It prevents families from breaking up and makes them stable and harmonious. Today I have brought you the gift of Dhamma in this time of illness. I have no material things to offer you. There seem to be plenty of those in this house already, and so I give you the Dhamma, something which has lasting worth, something which you'll never be able to exhaust. Having received it, you can pass it on to as many others as you like, and it'll never be depleted. That is the nature of truth. I am happy to have been able to give you this gift of Dhamma, and I hope that it will give you the strength to deal with your pain. This is the 10th talk or dialogue in this collection, and it's entitled Even One Word is Enough. And this is a talk, or rather a dialogue, that was first published in the book Everything is Teaching Us, again translated by Paul Breiter. And this was given to the Western Sangha, newly arrived in England in 1979. So I'm not quite sure what the occasion would have been, because they moved to England in 77, and Luang Por Chah came back to visit in 79. So whether that's a misprint and it should say newly arrived in 77, or whether it's when Luang Por Chah came back to visit them after having been there for a couple of years, I'm not quite sure. But it's that kind of occasion. So they're here in England. Even one word is enough. Whatever you will teach, it won't be outside of Sila, Samadhi and Panya, or, to use another standard classification, morality, meditation and generosity. People here are already pretty complicated. You have to look at those you are teaching and understand them. Because they're complicated, you have to give them something they can relate to. Just to say, let go, won't be right. Put that aside for the time being. It's like talking to older people in Thailand. If you try to speak bluntly, they'll resent it. If I do that, it's okay. If they hear it from me, it pleases them, but otherwise they would get angry. You can be able to speak well, but still not be skillful, right, Sumedho? It's like that, isn't it? Ajahn Sumedho says, it is. They, some of the other monks, speak the truth, but they don't do it skillfully, and the lay people don't want to listen. They don't have the skillful means. Ajahn Chah responds, right. They don't have a technique. They don't have the technique in speaking. Like construction. I can build things, but I don't have a technique for construction, to make things beautiful and long-lasting. I can speak, anyone can speak, but it's necessary to have the skillful means to know what is appropriate. Then saying even one word can be of benefit. Otherwise, you can cause trouble with your words. For example, people here have learned a lot of things. Don't go extolling your way, saying, my way is right, your way is wrong. Don't do that. And don't merely try to be profound either. You can lead people to madness by that. Just say, don't discard other ways you may have learned, but for the time being, please put them aside and focus on what we're practicing right now. For example, mindfulness of breathing. That's something you can all teach. Teach to focus on the breath going in and out. Just keep teaching in the same way, and let people get an understanding of this. When you become skilled at teaching one thing, your ability to teach will develop of its own, and you'll be able to teach other things. Coming to know one thing well, people can then know many things. It happens of its own. But if you try to teach them many things, they don't get a real understanding of any one thing. If you point out one thing clearly, then they can know many things clearly. Like those Christians who came today. They just said one thing. They said one thing that was full of meaning, saying, "One day we will meet again in the place of ultimate truth." Just this one statement was enough. Those were the words of a wise person. No matter what kind of Dhamma we learn, if we don't realize the ultimate truth, paramattha Dhamma, in our hearts, we won't reach satisfaction. For example, Sumedho might teach me. I have to take that knowledge and try to put it into practice. When Sumedho is teaching me, I understand, but it isn't a real or deep understanding because I haven't yet practiced. When I do actually practice and realize the fruit of practicing, then I will get to know the point and know the real meaning of it. Then I can say I know Sumedho. I will see Sumedho in that place. That place is Sumedho, because he teaches that. That is Sumedho. When I teach about the Buddha, it's like that also. I say the Buddha is that place. The Buddha is not in the teachings. When people hear this, they'll be startled. Huh? Didn't the Buddha teach those things? Yes, he did, but this is talking about ultimate truth. People don't understand it yet. What I gave those people to think about was, this apple is something that you can see with your eyes. The flavour of the apple isn't something you can know by looking at it, but you do see the apple. I felt that was as much as they were able to listen to. You can't see the flavour, but it's there. When will you know it? When you pick the apple up and eat it. The Dhamma we teach is like the apple. People hear it, but they don't really know the flavour of the apple. When they practice, then it can be known. The flavour of the apple can't be known by the eyes, and the truth of the Dhamma can't be known by the ears. There is knowledge, true, but it doesn't really reach the actuality. One has to put it into practice, then wisdom arises and one recognizes the ultimate truth directly. One sees the Buddha there. This is the profound Dhamma. So I compared it to an apple in this way for them. I offered it to that group of Christians to hear and think about. That kind of talk was a little salty, and the note says this doesn't have the same connotation in English as it does in Thai. In Thai it means something that is hard or direct. Salty is good, sweet is good, sour is good. Many different ways of teaching are good. Well, if you've got something to say, any of you, please feel free to say it. Soon we won't have a chance to discuss things. Sumedho's probably run out of things to say. Ajahn Sumedho says, "I'm fed up explaining things to people." Lumpur Chah responds, "Don't do that. You can't be fed up." Ajahn Sumedho responds, "Yes, I'll cut that off." Lumpur responds, "The head teacher can't do that. There are a lot of people trying to reach Nibbana, so they're depending on you." Sometimes teaching comes easily. Sometimes you don't know what to say. You're at a loss for words and nothing comes out. Or is it that you just don't want to talk? It's a good training for you. Ajahn Sumedho responds, "People around here are pretty good. They aren't violent and mean-spirited or troublesome. The Christian priests don't dislike us. The kind of questions people ask are about things like God. They want to know what God is, what Nibbana is. Some people believe that Buddhism teaches nihilism and wants to destroy the world." Ajahn Chah responds, "It means their understanding is not complete or mature. They are afraid everything will be finished, the world will come to an end. They conceive of Dhamma as something empty and nihilistic, so they're disheartened. Their way only leads to tears. Have you seen what it's like when people are afraid of emptiness? Householders try to gather possessions and watch over them like rats. Does this protect them from the emptiness of existence? They still end up on the funeral pyre, everything lost to them. But while they are alive, they're trying to hold on to things. Every day afraid they will be lost, trying to avoid emptiness. Do they suffer this way? Of course, they really do suffer. It's not understanding the real insubstantiality and emptiness of things. Not understanding this, people are not happy. Because people don't look at themselves, they don't really know what's going on in life. How do you stop this delusion? People believe, this is me, this is mine. If you tell them about not self, that nothing is me or mine, they are ready to argue the point until the day they die. Even the Buddha, after he attained knowledge, felt weary when he considered this. When he was first enlightened, he thought that it would be extremely troublesome to explain the way to others. But then he realized that such an attitude was not correct. If we don't teach such people, who will we teach? This is my question, which I used to ask myself at those times that I got fed up and I didn't want to teach anymore. Who should we teach if we don't teach the deluded? There's really nowhere else to go. When we get fed up and want to run away from disciples to live alone, we are deluded. One of the bhikkhus says, "We could be Pacceka Buddhas." Lumpur Cha responds, "That's good, but it's not really correct. Being a Pacceka Buddha because you simply want to run away from things." Ajahn Sumedho says, "Just living naturally in a simple environment, then we could naturally be Pacceka Buddhas. But these days it's not possible. The environment we live in doesn't allow that to happen. We have to live as monks." Ajahn Chah responds, "Sometimes you have to live in a situation like you have here first, with some disturbance. To explain it in a simple way, sometimes you will be an omniscient Sabbanyu Buddha, sometimes you'll be a Pacceka Buddha, one who lives in a solitary way. It depends on conditions." Talking about these kinds of beings is talking about the mind. It's not that one is born a Pacceka. This is what's called explanation by personification of states of mind, Pugala Dittana. Being a Pacceka, one abides indifferently and doesn't teach. Not much benefit comes from that, but when someone is able to teach others, then they are manifesting as an omniscient Buddha. These are only metaphors. Don't be anything. Don't be anything at all. Being a Buddha is a burden. Being a Pacceka is a burden. Just don't desire to be. I am the monk Sumedho. I am the monk Anando. That way is suffering, believing that you really exist thus. Sumedho is merely a convention. Do you understand? Believing you really exist brings suffering. If there is Sumedho, then when someone criticizes you, Sumedho gets angry. Anando gets angry. That's what happens if you hold on to these things as real. Anando and Sumedho get involved and are ready to fight. If there is no Anando or no Sumedho, then there's no one there. No one to answer the telephone. Ring, ring. Nobody picks it up. You don't become anything. No one is being anything. And there is no suffering. If we believe ourselves to be something or someone, then every time the phone rings, we pick it up and get involved. How can we free ourselves of this? We have to look at it clearly and develop wisdom, so that there is no Anando, no Sumedho to pick up the telephone. If you are Anando or Sumedho and you answer the telephone, you'll get yourself involved in suffering. So, don't be Sumedho, don't be Anando. Just recognize that these names are on the level of convention. If someone calls you good, don't be that. Don't think, I am good. If someone says you're bad, don't think, I'm bad. Don't try to be anything. Know what is taking place, but then don't attach to the knowledge either. People can't do this. They don't understand what it's all about. When they hear about this, they're confused and they don't know what to do. I've given the analogy before about upstairs and downstairs. When you go down from upstairs, you're downstairs, and you see the downstairs. When you go upstairs again, you see the upstairs. The space in between, you don't see. The middle. It means Nibbana is not seen. We see the forms of physical objects, but we don't see the grasping. The grasping at upstairs and downstairs, becoming and birth, becoming and birth. Continual becoming. The place without becoming is empty. When we try to teach people about the place that is empty, they just say, there's nothing there. They don't understand. It's difficult. Real practice is required for this to be understood. We have been relying on becoming, on self-grasping, since the day of our birth. When someone talks about non-self, it's too strange. We can't change our perceptions so easily. So it's necessary to make the mind see this through practice, and then we can believe it. Oh, it's true. When people are thinking, this is mine, they feel happy. But when the thing that is mine is lost, they'll cry over it. This is the path for suffering to come about. We can observe this. If there's no mine or me, we can make use of things while we are living, without attachment to them as being ours. If they're lost or broken, That's simply natural. We don't see them as ours or as anyone's, and we don't conceive of self or other. This isn't referring to a mad person. This is someone who is diligent. Such a person really knows what is useful in so many different ways, but when others look at him and try to figure him out, they will see someone who is crazy. When Sumedho looks at lay people, he will see them as ignorant, like little children. When lay people consider Sumedho, they'll think he's someone who's lost it. You don't have any interest in the things that they live for. To put it another way, an arahant and an insane person are similar. Think about it. When people look at an arahant, they'll think he's crazy. If you curse him, he doesn't care. Whatever you say to him, he doesn't react, like a crazy person. But he is crazy and has awareness. A truly insane person may not get angry when he's cursed, but that's because he doesn't know what's going on. Someone observing the arahant and the mad person might see them as the same. But the lowest is mad, the very highest is an arahant. Highest and lowest are similar if you look at their external manifestation, but their inner awareness, their sense of things, is very different. Think about this. When someone says something that ought to make you angry and you just let it go, people might think you're crazy. So when you teach others about these things, they don't understand it very easily. It has to be internalized for them to really understand. For example, in this country, people love beauty. If you just say, no, these things aren't really beautiful, they don't want to listen. If you talk about aging, they're not pleased. Death, they don't want to hear about it. It means they aren't really ready to understand. If they won't believe you, don't fault them for that. It's like you're trying to barter with them, to give them something new to replace what they have, but they don't see any value in the thing that you're offering. If what you have is obviously of the highest value, of course they'll accept it. But now, why don't they believe you? Your wisdom isn't sufficient, so don't get angry with them. What's wrong with you? You're out of your mind. Don't do that. You have to teach yourself first, to establish the truth of the Dhamma in yourself and develop the proper way to present it to others, and then they will accept it. Sometimes the Ajahn teaches the disciples, but the disciples don't believe what he says. That might make you upset, but instead of getting upset, it's better to search out the reason for their not believing. The thing that you're offering has little value to them. If you offer something of more value than what they have, of course they will want it. When you're about to get angry at your disciples, you should think like this, and then you can stop your anger. It's really not much fun to be angry. In order to get his disciples to realize the Dhamma, the Buddha taught a single path, but with varying characteristics. He didn't use only one form of teaching or present the Dhamma in the same way for everyone, but he taught for the single purpose of transcending suffering. All the meditations he taught were for this one purpose. The people of Europe already have a lot in their lives. If you try to lay something big and complicated on them, it might be too much. So, what should you do? Any suggestions? If anyone has something to talk about, now's the time. We won't have this chance again. Or if you don't have anything to discuss, if you've exhausted your doubts, I guess you can be Pacheka Buddhas. In the future, some of you will be Dhamma teachers. You will teach others. When you teach others, you're also teaching yourselves. Do any of you agree with this? Your own skillfulness and wisdom increase. Your contemplation increases. For example, you teach someone for the first time, and then you start to wonder why it's like that, what the meaning is. So you start thinking like this, and then you'll want to contemplate and find out what it really means. Teaching others, you're also teaching yourself in this way. If you have mindfulness, if you're practicing meditation, it'll be like this. Don't think that you're only teaching others. Have the idea that you are also teaching yourself. Then there is no loss. Ajahn Sumedho says, "It looks like people in the world are becoming more and more equal. Ideas of class and caste are falling away and changing. Some people who believe in astrology say that in a few years there'll be great natural disasters that will cause a lot of suffering in the world. I don't really know if it's true, but they think it's something beyond our capabilities to deal with, because our lives are too far from nature and we depend on machines for our lives of convenience. They say there'll be a lot of changes in nature, such as earthquakes, that nobody can foresee." Ajahn Chah responds, "They talk to make people suffer." Ajahn Sumedho responds, "Right. If we don't have mindfulness, we can really suffer over this. Ajahn Chah says, the Buddha taught about the present. He didn't advise us to worry about what might happen in 2 or 3 years. In Thailand, people come to me and say, "Oh, Luang Por, the communists are coming. What do we do?" I ask, "Where are those communists?" "Well, they're coming any day now," they say. We've had communists from the moment we were born. I don't try to think beyond that. Having the attitude that there are always obstacles and difficulties in life kills off the communists, quote unquote. Then we aren't heedless. Talking about what might happen in 4 or 5 years is looking too far away. They say, in 2 or 3 years Thailand will be communist. I've always felt that the communists have been around since I was born, and so I've always been contending with them, right up to the present moment. But people don't understand what I'm talking about. It's the truth. Astrology can talk about what's going to happen in 2 years, but when we talk about the present, they don't know what to do. Buddhism talks about dealing with things right now and making yourself well prepared for whatever might happen. Whatever might happen in the world, we don't have to be too concerned. We just practice to develop wisdom in the present and do what we need to do now, not tomorrow. Wouldn't that be better? We can wait for an earthquake that might come in 3 or 4 years, but actually things are quaking now. America is really quaking. People's minds are so wild. That's your quake right there, but folks don't recognize it. Big earthquakes only occur once in a long while, but this earth of our minds is always quaking, every day, every moment. In my lifetime I've never experienced a serious earthquake, but this kind of quake is always happening, shaking us and throwing us all around. This is where the Buddha wanted us to look, but maybe that's not what people want to hear. Things happen due to causes. They cease due to causes ceasing. We don't need to be worrying about astrological predictions. We can just know what is occurring now. Everyone likes to ask these questions, though. In Thailand, the officials come to me and say, "The whole country will be communist. What will we do if that happens?" We were born. What do we do about that? I haven't thought much about this problem. I've always thought since the day I was born, the communists have been after me. After I reply like this, they don't have anything to say. It stops them. People may talk about the dangers of communists taking over in a few years, but the Buddha taught us to prepare ourselves right now, to be aware and contemplate the dangers we face that are inherent in this life. This is the big issue. Don't be heedless. Relying on astrology to tell you what will happen in a couple of years from now doesn't get to the point. Relying on Buddhology, you don't have to chew over the past. You don't have to worry about the future, but you look at the present. Causes are arising in the present, so observe them in the present. People who say those things are only teaching others to suffer. But if someone talks the way I do, people will say they're crazy. In the past, there was always a movement, but it was only a little bit at a time, so it wasn't noticeable. For example, Sumedho, when you were first born, were you this size? This is the result of movement and change. Is change good? Of course it is. If there were no movement or change, you never would have grown up. So we don't need to fear natural transformation. If you contemplate Dhamma, I don't know what else you would need to think about. If someone predicts what will happen in a few years, we can't just wait and see what happens before we do anything. We can't live like that. Whatever we need to do, we have to do it now, without waiting for anything particular to happen. These days the populace is in constant motion. The 4 elements are in motion. Earth, water, fire and air are moving. But people don't recognize that the earth is moving. They only look at the external earth and don't see any movement. In the future, in this world, if people are married and stay together for more than a year or 2, others will think there's something wrong with them. A few months will be the standard. Things are in constant motion like this. It's the minds of people that are moving. You don't need to look at astrology. Look to Buddhology and you can understand this. Luang Por, if the communists come, where will you go? Where is there to go? We've been born and we face aging, sickness and death. Where can we go? We have to stay right here and deal with these things. If the communists take over, we'll stay in Thailand and deal with that. Won't they have to eat rice too? Why are you so fearful? If you keep worrying about what might happen in the future, there's no end to it. There is only constant confusion and speculation. Sumedho, do you know what will happen in 2 or 3 years? Will there be a big earthquake? When people come to ask you about these things, you can tell them that they don't really need to look so far ahead to things they can't really know for certain. Tell them about the moving and quaking that's always going on, about the transformation that allowed you to grow up and be as you are now. The way people think is that having been born, they don't want to die. Is that correct? It's like pouring water into a glass but not wanting it to fill up. If you keep pouring the water, you can't expect it not to be full. But people think like this. They're born, but they don't want to die. Is that correct thinking? Consider it. If people are born but never die, will that bring happiness? If no one who comes into the world dies, things will be a lot worse. If no one ever dies, we'll probably all end up eating excrement. Where would we all stay? It's like pouring water into a glass without ceasing, yet not wanting it to be full. We really ought to think things through. We're born, but we don't want to die. If we really don't want to die, we should realize the deathless, the Dhamma as the Buddha taught. Do you know what Dhamma means? It is the deathless. Though you die, if you have wisdom, it's as if you don't die. Not dying, not being reborn, that's where things can be finished. Being born and wishing for happiness and enjoyment without dying is not the correct way at all. But that's what people want, so there's no end of suffering for them. The practitioner of Dhamma does not suffer. Well, practitioners such as ordinary monks still suffer because they haven't yet fulfilled the path of practice. They haven't realized Dhamma, so they still suffer. They're still subject to death. Dhamma is the deathless. Born of the womb, can we avoid death? Apart from realizing that there is no real self, there is no way to avoid death. I don't die. Sankhara undergo transformation following their nature. This is hard to see. People can't think like this. You need to get free of worldliness, like Sumedho did. You need to leave the big, comfortable home and the world of progress, like the Buddha did. If the Buddha had remained in his royal palace, he wouldn't have become the Buddha. It was by leaving the palace and going to live in forests that he attained that. The life of pleasure and amusement in the palace was not the way to enlightenment. Who is it that tells you about the astrological predictions? Ajahn Sumedho replies, a lot of people talk about it. Often they just like a hobby or a lot of people talk about it, often just like a hobby or a casual interest. Ajahn Chah responds, if it really is as they say, then what should people do? Are they offering any path to follow? From my point of view, the Buddha taught very clearly. He said that the things we can't be sure about are many, starting from the time we were born. Astrology may talk about months or years in the future, but the Buddha points to the moment of birth. Predicting the future may make people anxious about what could happen, but the truth is that uncertainty is always with us, right from birth. People aren't likely to believe such talk, are they? If you, he said, speaking to a layperson who was present, are afraid, then consider this. Suppose that you were convicted of a crime that calls for capital punishment, and in 7 days you will be executed. What would go through your mind? This is my question for you. If in 7 days you will be executed, what will you do? If you think about it and take a step further, you'll realize that all of us right now are sentenced to die. Only we don't know when it'll happen. It could be sooner than 7 days. Are you aware that you are under a death sentence? If you were to violate the law of the land and be sentenced to death, you would certainly be most distressed. Meditation on death is recollecting that death is going to take us, and it could be very soon. But you don't think about it, so you feel you're living comfortably. If you do think about it, it'll cause you to have devotion to the practice of Dhamma. So the Buddha taught us to practice the recollection of death regularly. Those who don't recollect it live with fear. They don't know themselves. But if you do recollect and are aware of yourself, it'll lead you to want to practice Dhamma seriously and be free from such fear. If you are aware of this death sentence, you will want to find a solution. Generally, people don't like to hear such talk. Doesn't that mean they are far from the true Dhamma? The Buddha urged us to recollect death, but people get upset by such talk. That's the karma of beings. They do have some knowledge of this fact, but the knowledge isn't yet clear.